President Trump is now on Air Force One, headed back to Washington after day 2 of the NATO summit officially wrapped up. I'm Scripps News' Holly Furfer, and this is On the Scene. Trump maintained that the U.S. airstrike on Iran's nuclear facilities was a, quote, total obliteration.
We hear it was obliteration. It was a virtual obliteration. When you take a look at the ground above, don't forget, the flame is all underground. But everything above, if you look at the before and the after picture, everything above is burned black. The trees, everything.
Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull live now in The Hague, Netherlands. And Haley, how else is President Trump addressing the reports on the intelligence assessment of the strike's destruction in Iran?
Well, Holly, what we've heard here in The Hague from President Trump and other top administration officials is largely dismissing and criticizing those reports, but not refuting them.
So,
President Trump saying... And there you heard a snippet of him just there. President Trump earlier saying that the intelligence was inconclusive, saying that they don't know. It could have been very severe. But in that press conference within the last hour, maintaining his assessment that it was obliterated in his view. In fact, the president saying he expected to talk with the Iranians next week, that while he's not interested in negotiating, he does want them to sign a statement or agreement that they are not pursuing nuclear capabilities. However, Secretary of State Marco Rubio underscoring one important point in this, saying it will depend on Iran's willingness to negotiate directly with the U.S. when speaking more broadly about the relationship with Iran. So certainly the president digging his heels in and slamming those reports as he looks to see more intelligence assessments come through, Holly.
Haley, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte reiterated unwavering support for Ukraine. Did President Trump give any indication about how he's viewing the conflict at this point?
Yeah, Holly, President Trump meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here in The Hague. It was a central focus for NATO members over the course of these past 2 days, with Zelenskyy meeting with many European counterparts on the sideline of this as well. President Trump calling it a good meeting with Zelenskyy, which is a striking contrast from the last meeting they had at the Oval Office, in the Oval Office at the White House months ago, where the meeting devolved and President Zelenskyy ended up leaving. President Trump indicating that it is possible Russian President Vladimir Putin does have territorial ambitions, taking a different tone in how he addresses the Russian leader, calling him misguided and saying that he's very surprised. And this is significant as he also suggested perhaps an openness to selling Ukraine weapons. Listen.
Have the anti-missile missiles, okay, as they call them, the Patriots, and we're going to see if we can make some available. You know, they're very hard to get. We need them too. We were supplying them to Israel, and they're very effective, 100% effective. Hard to believe how effective, and they do want that more than any other thing.
And Holly, one of the things coming out of the summit we are seeing is that final joint communique, which addresses allies' commitments for defense spending with Ukraine, but does not contain the same strong language calling out Russian aggression or unwavering support for Ukraine that we saw in last year's language, despite NATO Secretary General reiterating and reaffirming that more broadly. Now, it is notable that as Trump is leaving this summit, he is able to tout an agreement for allies to spend 5% of their country's GDP on defense, something he has long called for. So he is framing this as a victory here. And what we are hearing from European allies publicly is a support of this measure, though Trump specifically criticized Spain as they had dug their heels in some on this. He alluded to potentially making that something that becomes part of the trade deal, or upping that ante in that regard over this. Now, coming into NATO, he had raised questions over his Article 5 commitment when he alluded to it perhaps depends on how you view the definition of it. But when he was pressed on that again today, President Trump saying he left NATO differently, describing what he saw from the leaders of other countries when it comes to their passion towards their countries, as well as their reliance on the United United States moving forward. NATO Secretary General dismissing concerns over those as he has praised Trump throughout these past 2 days quite heavily, Holly.
Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull live for us in the Netherlands. Thank you for that update, and thank you for great reporting at the summit for this past couple of days.